this streaming yet? I want to make sure it is streaming at least. Cool, it looks like it's live. Great. Class is not starting yet. That's fine. We are just here before class chatting with the teacher just because I got time and sometimes so do you. Also, we have Krampus to join us. So he won't be scratching at the door. You better not scratch at the door. Krampus, show them your loveliness. Yeah, whatever. Get out of here. Get out of here. He loves touches, but he doesn't love being held so much. Which, hey, you know, I get it. Somebody massaging my back is different than somebody picking me up without my request or consent. You know what I mean? So I do try to remember that. He is his own little individual being. He is not just like a toy or something for me. That's why I never understand when people blame their cats for scratching them. You know, if I'm, you know, when a cat's about to scratch you, you know what I mean? It's your own fault. Hello, Summer. Krampus? Krampus. Oh, come on, Krampus. He's rubbing his face on the thing. I was going to try to get Krampus to say hello to you, Summer. So we are starting class in like 7 minutes. Trying to figure out which glasses should we go for today. I'm not even sure if we can keep the light on very long, but if we can, let me know which glasses. We're actually going to talk about Egypt today, and I thought about doing Egyptian style stuff. I've got this, which is very fun. I actually got it at the King Tut exhibit that was in Korea, I think in 2012. So there's that, but I don't have any black wigs, and the Egyptians didn't just have black wigs. They had black wigs with other colors in it, but I don't have anything with just a black wig. So I thought, well, what if I wear that? Is that more accurate than me? I don't know. So I've got some goldish and blue earrings going on. Sun and moon, or not, star and moon, you know, I don't know. So we got these glasses, which, you know what? No, we're not doing glasses. Just, whoops. I can't find my my migraine glasses that are just the yellow ones. I have these other ones that are just these big hearts, and I don't know if that's what I want to do. So we'll see. We'll see. It annoyed me with the question about the kitty cats. I don't even, you know, I don't even remember what question you asked. So no, I guess it couldn't have been too annoying. Krampus! Psst! Krampus! I'm gonna throw something at him. What are you even scratching? What is in there? I'm thinking that something in a box is for him. It's not for him. I wish South Korea paid for Botox for migraines. Yeah, and I could really do with some here maybe too. I was worried about my range of motion, but right now I think I would like to have my range of motion limited. Okay, come on you. Stop being a little dork, okay? You just stay here. Be happy. Enjoy. This is where you want to be. It's like a little cave, right? There's a little setup here, and you can go under this little table thing. Okay, it's like a little Krampus cave. You know what's fun is that he does this during my actual classes and when I'm doing online teaching. So that's fun. We have Krampus showing up in the middle of these classes. Thank you, Krampus. Where he's scratching on the door to the point that I gotta let him in, you know. And so I'm just like, okay, here's a question, answer it, mute, and, you know, whatever, go get Krampus, come back. Yeah, so what's the answer to your question? Yeah, you can do it strategically. But he's happy that I'm teaching from home. He and his son are, the other cats I think are very, they don't really care either way. Classy teacher look today. Yes, thank you. I was kind of going for like early 1900s Egyptologist. That was the idea. Yeah, I started wearing my hair up a lot at work, except for in the Krampus. I'm sorry, I have to, if he's gonna do this, I have to take him out. And I can't stop the live stream, but whatever. Okay, I'll be right back. Ugh. Krampus, you're being a bad child. This is not for you. Nothing in here is for you, okay? If you want to stay in here, totally acceptable. Unacceptable is what you're doing, okay? So we're gonna put this on top. Yeah, that's what I thought, okay? Go away. Oh, you know what? This might actually work. Come on, Krampus. Is this going to work? Okay. So Krampus is not a fan of the carrier, the cat carrier box, which I just happen to have in here. And I moved it to be on top of the other box, and he walked away towards the door. So I thought, okay, what if I put this in front of the door, and this will be a deterrent, hopefully, a door turret. We'll see. But yeah, I started keeping my hair up like this because it gets very hot and humid, as you know, in Korea. And so this was a way to do that. Short wigs also help. So if I have my hair wrapped up under a very like short wig, that keeps my neck nice and cool too. So that's also helpful. The Jack Nicholson brows for one side are just like, yeah, I don't know if I'd mind that as much. I don't know how weird it would look. Because, you know, I'm around mostly Koreans, and then I'm not Korean, so it's always a little different when it's like somebody that has physical features outside the norm that you're used to seeing in your day-to-day life. It's, you know, you might be able to say something looks a little odd about their face, but you don't exactly know what it is. But I think it might help, because I have like one eyebrow what's the other one? Where's the other one? I can't. There's that one, and then this one here kind of goes up and does its own thing. I don't know. I feel like they're very uneven looking. They're not drawn on or anything. They're just uneven. You got your $600 stimulus money. Well, that's cool. I wonder if I got mine. So I still get it. So I got to pay taxes on all of this, you know, Patreon stuff too. I mean, well, it depends on how much you make. Then you have to pay taxes. We still have to file taxes. I'm not sure. What am I going to do with that money? I've been keeping a savings account for my niece and nephews. So it might just go to that. It might go to... we had a death in the family, so I might be donating some more stuff to the direct family. So we shall see. This is great. This saved it the wrong way. Let me see. Doing the sign in with your face. I like the face sign in, the facial recognition, you know. For some of you, they're like, oh, the government. Look, the government has this already. This is nothing special. Yeah, I guess I got mine too. 600. I thought it was supposed to be 2,000 as well, you know. I will say that before we start class, you know, some people say, well, you know, people should be grateful for this, and you know, I kind of disagree. You know, other countries like Korea are giving people that need the help. I don't get that help because I still have a job right now. So I don't need that help. So I would be much happier if we just assessed the people that needed help, and then people like me that don't need it, we're not getting this extra money. So because I have it, I feel like I should give it to a charity or something. I don't know. My parents were like, no, it's, you know, you're an American, it's your money, you're a veteran, whatever. I don't know. We'll see what we do with it. Maybe I'll just buy $600 worth of wigs. We will see. I don't know. If you guys have any suggestions, I already donate to charities on the regular, so if I were to donate, I'd probably donate to those charities. If you guys have any ideas, let me know. So what time are we at? We are at... I just have to make sure this timestamp, because we're going to delete this from the actual video when we upload it. So we're at 8:56. That's okay. We'll just do it at 9. All right. Hello, students, and welcome to class. We're talking about Egypt today. So for those of you that are in history class or are wondering how this corresponds to your history class, this should be after the early human civilization, such as Neanderthal, Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, that sort of thing. Chapter 2 for a lot of your books. This is when you guys will start talking about very early thriving civilizations as opposed to the start of civilization. No surprise it took months last time. Yeah, that's what I kind of don't understand. What is... so for those of you that were not here a few minutes earlier and just joining us in the video after the live stream, we were talking about the stimulus check situation for people in the United States, and you're just kind of wondering why some people get it and some people don't. I feel like I don't know why it's such a clunky system. Hopefully this will be changed, but you never know. So did anyone want to talk about what is the new year? So did anyone want to talk about any things before, just like in a normal class, we don't have to dive right into the PowerPoint. Did anyone want to talk about any of their ideas for 2021, if they have any hopes, especially for those of you, I think most of you here are in the United States, so if you have any hopes for, the new president, if you just have stuff about Egypt that you wanted to talk about, or this is what I've heard about Egypt, or I'm not sure, but I think I heard this about Egypt. Did anybody have that? For me, I don't typically make a New Year's resolution, but everyone always asks, so I do have one that I always say, which is, well, I hope to live through another year, because if that's my New Year's resolution, I will be successful all the time, except for one time, and then I won't care. So if you want to use that too, feel free. But that is my permanent New Year's resolution, is just to live through the next and, see the next year. So we'll see. So all things considered, we shall see. If it helps, did anybody want like a little, I don't know, after school mental health chat? You guys can, we can get together and just, you guys can vent about stuff. I'm not a therapist or anything, but I, just don't mind giving you guys a place to talk and have someone listen to you. If you guys think that'll be helpful, please let me know. Okay. Have you seen any picture of Egypt from the 1980s? They look a lot more of Europe. Yes. There's also some pictures like from the 60s and 70s as well. There's a lot of the same with Iran and Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, Afghanistan, definitely. They are really interesting images before the Islamic Revolution. So it's a really stark contrast, I think, is the most neutral way to say that. That's a very stark contrast, yes. All right, I'm gonna let you guys answer my questions that I had posed to you. There was a bit of a delay between when I speak and when it actually shows up, so I'm gonna have my tea and let you guys talk. I hope I don't cough too much. I have elderflower, dried elderflower in here, so my immune system needs all the help it can get. I'm not taking elderflower for my immune system by itself and whatever, and I'm not recommending that you guys do it too. I've talked to my doctor and all this other stuff, right? But I'm taking everything I can for my immune system, just because I've been dealing with an issue with my lymph nodes that they're not sure what it is, so I've called it Schrödinger's virus, and we'll see. Does anybody have any favorite parts of ancient Egypt, or maybe any favorite gods from ancient Egypt? When we say gods, it's sort of like, I think that term is starting to change. Like the term actor and actress, we just say actor now as the gender neutral term. We've done that with words in the past, like murderer. We just use murderer. We don't say murderess anymore. And I think that's sort of changing with gods and goddesses. Just such a mouthful to say goddesses. Or we could just say deities. Do you have any favorite deities at all? Would you lecture in a British posh accent? It sounds more official. I don't think I can do a British posh accent. I think the last time we did that on Patreon, somebody said that I sounded like I was from Bath. So that's what British people tell me, that of my accent, there were parts that are like, oh, you're obviously not British, but if I were to assume you were British, you sound like you're from Bath. I don't know if that's an insult or what. It's like, oh yeah, your American accent sounds like you're from backwater Kentucky. You know, it's like, is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I don't think it's a bad thing. Just it's its own thing. I like ibis. Yes, the ibis. Let's look at that bird. Oh, okay. Ibis. There we are. So the god that you're thinking of probably is Thoth. That is the god of writing and the god of like education. So one of my favorites. But yes, the ibis-headed goth is Thoth. That's our good friend Thoth. It's such a fun-looking bird, though. There's a lot of really interesting stuff, and I love being able to teach history and teach geography. Please let me know if you would like me to finish the whole year of history before I start geography, or if I should also teach geography at this, like, concurrently. I don't mind doing either. I just don't know if that would be too annoying to have like multiple live streams in a day or what. So please just let me know what you guys would prefer. We're still having that nose drippy issue from yesterday. Do excuse me. So I like being able to talk to the geography students about what's going on in the Nile. Oh, because there's the lag now, I can see the top of my head, and it's just a part of your body you don't see very often. I studied under a dialect teacher from My Fair Lady. Oh, that's very cool. That's very cool. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys want to hear my British accent, but I don't know how good it is. It's definitely not posh, right? It's not a posh accent, not at all. So it's very, very not posh. All right, so we're going to go ahead and just get started, and we got our good friends like the Sumerians that we talked about last time, and we use this image too. I tend to use the same images because I think it helps to jog the memory, especially if I make a comment on the image, like how this guy really looks like one of my cousins. So it's kind of fun. So of course, Egypt is built around a river. Does anyone remember what Mesopotamia means? I know that you guys are not like right in front of me, but I'm still giving you time to answer. Apparently, the average question answer gap that teachers usually give is less than 1 second. Where they'll say like, do you know what this means? It means this. Why? So I don't mind waiting. I'm very good with just sitting here quietly because of the military. You had to just sit in silence for so long. Good go, not posh. Agreed. Exactly. Yes, it's not a it's not posh at all. Between two rivers, exactly. Yes, Mesopotamia is between two rivers. Awesome. So the Nile actually isn't one river. It actually is two rivers that becomes one river. And so we have this white Nile here, and we have the blue Nile over here. That's over in Ethiopia. These are going to start in mountains, and so that means just like any other river situation, you're going to start with the source of the river, which means the start of the river, that's in the mountains, and then the mouth of the river, which is the end of the river, is going to be usually in a sea, an ocean, or a lake, unless it just like goes underground, which happens sometimes in like Eastern Europe, for example. The way I tell the students to kind of remember that the difference between source and mouth. Source, you can think of origin or something that might help you, but mouth, you can definitely, that's where it comes out, right? It just like vomits into the sea, which is a very disgusting image, I know, but because it's disgusting, you'll remember it, okay? So that's the whole point. Right, so good. You got the between two rivers and between the rivers, very good. So the Blue Nile and White Nile come together, and we end up with the Nile, okay? So the White Nile, and again, we'll talk about this more with the geography stuff, but the White Nile has several cataracts, which are not cataracts, but they are like waterfalls. And so that might be one of the reasons to call it white, just because there's so many rapids and that sort of thing going on. And then we end it in this delta. Again, you're supposed to be taking geography before taking history, but that's not your guys' fault. I started teaching history first. So the delta here, it's just from our good friends in Greek, alpha, beta, gamma, delta. It's just shaped like a triangle, upside down, and that's our delta, okay? So this happens just because as a river is flowing fast and it hits this body of water that's not flowing very fast, and also some of the water is coming up towards the coast and the river's coming out, it just kind of slows the river down. And as we slow that river down, we're spreading it out a bit, and we end up with this really cool looking tree looking thing. I wish they would have called it a tree instead of a delta, but then again, I guess that would have been confusing. A river tree, river branches, I don't know. Geography is very straightforward in a lot of its nomenclature, thankfully. All right. Hope you guys are having fun learning about rivers. So because we end up with these Nile differences, because also we have the higher altitude portion of the Nile is in the south, so the mountains are in the south, in other words. Upper Egypt is in the south and Lower Egypt is in the north, okay? Rivers do not flow uphill, but rivers absolutely can flow from from south to north, okay? So as long as south is uphill, it's going to flow that way. There's some confusion that north means up. So I just wanted to clarify that. It's totally fine for rivers to flow. They can flow north as long as north is downhill. Okay, so we just so we're clear on that. So why do we have this separation just because of that? Let me see if I had put it into the PPT here. No, that's okay. It's for the other PowerPoint. That's fine. So the reason that we're splitting this up is because, as I said, the White Nile and these parts in like Upper Egypt, these Nile parts in Upper Egypt, we end up having all of these waterfalls. Now, I know this might be difficult to think back, 4,000 years, 3,000 years. Is it easy to take a wooden boat up and down a river with waterfalls? No. So those are the reasons that it's really going to stop us. A lot of people tend to think of rivers or seas or oceans as sort of a barrier between civilizations, especially if the river's quite wide. But in reality, rivers, seas, and oceans are more like highways. These are the ways that ancient people could travel very, very quickly. So the river, of course, is what we want to use for traveling between Upper and Lower Egypt, but that's going to be pretty difficult, right? With all those waterfalls. So that means if I want to do any trade or invasion or anything like that, it's mostly going to be by foot. Okay, so that's not the easiest thing to do, and that's why Upper and Lower Egypt were separated for a time, okay? Just so we know. And I'm going to check back on our post here, or thing here. I don't know why this is always so hard for me to split this screen. My goodness, I feel old. So happy that you're back. What happened to your show? Oh, thank you, Summer. Yes, fantastic. That's a great way to do it. Yes, yes. I don't know. Person Jugs, Captain Jugs. I don't know if you're Mr. or Ms. or Mux or what. But yes, that's what we're doing. So we're kind of relaunching it more of a like a different live stream sort of thing. Not just because the student found it. That's definitely the biggest push. But I thought it might be fun to have these live streams. A lot of people really responded well to the live streams that we were doing before. And I thought it might be fun to run it like a class, especially since everyone is kind of stuck indoors and stuff. So we got our good friend silt. Has anybody heard of silt? Anybody at all? You can see the silt. It looks pretty. It's red. But has anybody heard of silt? Mr. Jiggy, like the kind of Banjo-Kazooie. Okay, Mr. Jiggy it is. See, it's not that hard to call people things that they want to be called, right? The more you know. So what is silt? Has anybody heard of silt, but they don't actually understand what it means? You're like, yeah, it comes from the Nile, silt. I had to memorize that for school, but what is it? Why is it good? Mississippi connected Midwest and Mexico nation. Yes, absolutely. The only downside for a lot of people that were traveling in the early start of, I guess, the United States from the eastern side to the western side. There's not really anything that goes east to west like that, and you end up with this big mountain range in the middle. So you're kind of going upstream, and then you got to climb over some mountains and then go downstream. So it's not the easiest thing to navigate by river. Yeah, for sure. Those people were really trying, and it's definitely easy to see why there were just like packs of people, you know what I mean? Just these civilizations of the Native Americans. They didn't like span super huge distances, because why would you, you know? So does anyone maybe doesn't know what silt is? So the reason I'm asking is, you know, number one, interaction is cool, but number two, how much of this do I have to explain? That's the other thing I want to kind of gauge. I'm totally fine with explaining this to you guys. Don't worry. I've noticed that it's interesting that I think everybody watching this right now, or at least is participating, is an adult. And we kind of get on teenagers because when we ask them questions, they don't answer them. And we ask them these questions, and, you know, well, how come you don't answer it? Well, I don't want to look silly. I don't want to look stupid. But for a lot of times, adults react the same way. And so that's one reason I try to explain to the students that you only look stupid if you pretend like you know. That's the only time you look stupid. Yeah, so you're not sure what silt is. That's totally fine. You guys have probably heard of it, though, right? I felt the same way when I was learning about things like textiles. That was never explained to me in school, but I had to just memorize textiles. And of course, we didn't have the internet like we do today. So I, you know, would hear the word and kind of forget to look it up in the dictionary later. And every time the teacher talked about it, I was just like, are these tiles with text on it? like is it cuneiform tablets or something? But that doesn't make sense. Why would that be part of like a, you know, an economy? Like I didn't get it. And the teacher never explained it. It was just reading out of the book. This is what textiles are. This is silt. Remember, silt comes out of the Nile River. And so they never explained it. So I always want to make sure that we're on the same page. So for silt, it is awesome for farming. And I just want to show this to you really quick, and then we'll explain what silt is. So from between June and September, we get this action here, which I was afraid was going to happen. That's okay. So June and September, you get this river that goes over the riverbank. So it floods. Okay. When that comes back, it goes back into the river, and the river goes into its normal situation, then that's when you start planting your first planting of the year, or after the main flood. Now notice where people live. They're not going to live in this region here. Okay, this is called a flood plain because it's a plain that floods. The floodplain is, you know, you want to live as close to the floodplain as you can so you can be very close to your fields. However, please do understand, because you might wonder, why do those people live there? They know that this river floods, right? And so we end up with, we hear about people that are dying in a flood, their homes are swept away. And so the first thought might be, well, how come they were living so close to a river if they know that river floods? So this floodplain here that we see, this is the normal floodplain. This is the year-to-year floodplain. However, about every 100 years, we end up with something that goes out even further. So we end up with a flood that might come out to over here, because I think you guys can see my mouse. So it will actually swallow up some of these homes. That bigger section is called the 100-year floodplain. So we want to be careful of that. And so you still, again, might be thinking, well, you know, why don't you just live on the outside of the 100-year floodplain? Number one, maybe it's a bit far to walk, especially if you have a lot of children. Number two, living in that area can be prone to a surprise flood, that's going to usually be a little bit cheaper. So if you're a family that doesn't have a lot of money, you're probably going to live on the 100-year floodplain, but not within the yearly floodplain. So that is just something to be aware of. Okay. What are some things that could cause the river to flood extra? Like, why would it flood extra? Why does it flood every year? Like, why are we even flooding every year? Why does this happen at all? So I'm going to go and check this. Has anyone here visited Egypt? No, AABB, but there is a person who does join us pretty regularly named Shugul, and Shugul lives in Egypt. Hoping 2021 is better than 2020. We'll see. We're on day 2, so we'll see. I'm sure 2021 will be better. I got big plans this year. Hopefully vaccines bring the COVID lockdowns to an end. I think I read that China just approved a new vaccine, and it's like a general vaccine. We shall see. Summer, maybe you and I, maybe we'll go to Egypt. Okay, let's just do it. Let's just go to Egypt. We have to be careful though, because there are certain laws that we do have to observe, even as tourists. So we do want to be careful with that. All right, so why do we get this flood happening? Sorry, I've lost my spot here. Every year. What's some kind of event that's going to be causing this flood? Yearly. Starting around early summer. Can we think of something? You know, I think that we take a lot of this stuff just for granted, right? Oh yeah, rivers flood. That's what they do. You know, but we don't think about why this is happening. So we don't understand, well, why would a 100-year floodplain need to exist? So those are some things we need to make sure we establish. What would it be? So while you guys are thinking about that, why do rivers flood? Yearly. Not like, oh, there's a hurricane and everything got crazy. Like, yearly, why do they flood? Could be monsoon, absolutely. So that's a wind system that brings a lot of rain, especially in the summer, in the southeast/east/South Asia. And so we can actually look at the monsoon wind pattern just to see, is that going to apply? So we have some of the West African monsoon, so that's not going to be us, we're up here. And then we're going to have this South Asia monsoon, and that's going to be over here. And we can see Korea gets it. That's why Korea's summers are so wet, and they're, sorry, and the winters now are so dry, which is one reason I have to keep drinking stuff. So that's a great guess. That's not the case in this particular region, but that is the case in definitely some other regions. Snow melts, yes. So that snow melts that we're going to have happening in the summer, not so much the spring, in the mountains. That's going to be it. So now we can think, well, what would cause that 100-year floodplain? Perhaps extra heavy snowfall that year. So that's one of the reasons that will happen. So now, what is silt? So as we're going through the river, we can go back up here to this river delta. One of the reasons this starts to deposit silts is because as we're rushing down this like river and we're going to the mouth of the river, which is the slow sea coming at us here, we're rushing, and we slow down. All of this suspended particulate, all these little particles that are suspended in that rushing water, suddenly drop out. The river is not moving quickly enough to suspend that anymore. And you guys know exactly how that works, right? You have your, you could have sand or something in a clear glass of water. And when you swirl it up, the faster you go, the higher those sand particles can be suspended in the water. But as soon as that water slows down or stops moving, all of that sand just kind of falls to the bottom. It's the same concept here. So wait a minute, isn't sand not that great to grow stuff in? Exactly. So it's not just sand, it's going to be all of those dead things. And we know that plants love dead stuff, right? So all of those dead things that the water had picked up, the pieces of that fish, excuse me, the pieces of the fish that had died where maybe a crocodile or something is eating the rest of the fish, but you get those little pieces that are coming off and they build up over time. Anything that's sunk to the bottom and wasn't eaten for some reason, but the moving of the water is jostling that around and picking it up and carrying it. All of that nutrition now becomes suspended in the water. So not only is it sediment, like pieces of dirt, but you're getting nutrition. And now that nutrition, that good, tasty nutrition, tasty for plants, is now put onto the soil. So that's why silt is so awesome. That's the stuff that we're going to get. Korean winters are very cold and the summer is very humid and hot. Yearly temperature fluctuation reaches 70 degrees C. Yes, not a great time. Definitely not. My family lives in a more temperate region, and I remember visiting from here in the summer. It was like 30 or 33 degrees Celsius, and then when I went there, it was like 16 degrees Celsius, and everybody was shorts and t-shirt, and I was just like wrapping myself in hoodies and jackets. I was so cold, just because of that relative difference. So agriculture is going to be happening in Lower Egypt. Again, that's where that delta is going to be. So we're having all that extra awesome agriculture in the area that gets the most silt. Okay, with this yearly, this yearly flood, that's going to affect all of the Nile Delta. So we're going to have these nice fields that grow around the delta, cool, but at the delta, that's where we're going to get most of the farm, or the biggest area for farmland. So if I'm going from Lower to Upper Egypt, I'm using the winds. And if I'm going from Upper to Lower Egypt, I'm just using the Nile's current, just in case anybody cares. Dry summer is better for human activities. Yeah, I would say so. It's also less hot. Just the perception of that the heat index, it appears less hot. Because you're able to get rid of some of that heat through sweat, as opposed to sweating and then humidity on top of it is not a fun time. So Mesopotamia was made of a lot of different city-states. As we talked about last time, Mesopotamia is not a nation. Mesopotamia is a region. And inside this region, there are these city-states. You guys have probably heard of some of these, like Assyria, Nineveh, Ashur, and so on. I had breathing trouble this summer. It was really painful. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope that you were able to find something that helped, or at least figured out what was triggering that. So some of the cities are, the nations are a little bit bigger, like Sumer, like where the Sumerians were. So they had their own cities on top of that as well. And some other cities as well, if you guys are curious, okay? But Egypt is pretty isolated. If I live in a place like this, that means that, remember we showed that that city like Jericho and how it had that really big wall around it. That's something that's going to protect me from everybody else who wants to get in. But I'm in Egypt. I'm pretty isolated. Why? Can anybody guess why Egypt would be pretty isolated? That if I'm going to worry about invasions or something, I'm typically going to worry about it coming from another part of Egypt as opposed to an invading army from somewhere else. Now, of course, the Egyptians were invaded by outsiders, but it was pretty rare. Anybody know why that is? I'll let you guys answer that. Excuse me. So why might Egypt be really isolated from outsiders, from foreigners? Do my dance. All right, it looks like maybe you guys are busy or no answer. That's okay. We'll just go ahead and, sorry, I think I have something that's not supposed to be in here. That's all right. We'll just set this aside. So, of course, this beautiful Nile River is awesome. That's where we want to be. That's where we're doing all that farming. And the reason we want to be so close to that is because everything else is desert. Okay, hey, very good. We got desert here. Exactly, just as I said it. Deserts are not the end, but if a river is a highway, a desert is definitely a desert. I mean, there's no other way to really say that. It's not even a cobblestone road or something. A desert is very difficult for people to want to go through. So that's why typically if there was any type of invasions, it would be from areas that were along the Nile or just more south, out of that sub-Saharan kind of region. So things didn't really change for Egypt. A lot of the farming was very similar, clothing, buildings, a lot of it pretty much just remained the same. So that's a pretty interesting thing. If we can look at this art. So we got a difference of what, about 1,500 years. And the art pretty much stays the same. That's pretty intense. Okay, especially with Pharaoh Hatshepsut here. Nefertiti as Smenkhare was her own pharaoh as well. There were other female pharaohs, but Pharaoh Hatshepsut wanted to be portrayed very masculinely, very masculine style. So even though we have Pharaoh Hatshepsut who is female, and these guys are male pharaohs, it's like the exact same look, isn't it? Sometimes Pharaoh Hatshepsut would be sporting a false beard, which is pretty cool. No candy for the right answer. I will give you... Oh, didn't we give the... We don't have a gold star. We have the steel razor blade. So that's it. Good job. We'll put like a star. Okay. It's shiny. It counts. Actually, there's a Korean song named Dessert. Okay. Well, cool. I do not know it, but cool. So I think this is really interesting, just this whole concept of your art not changing. Like, think of something that we have now that we also had 1,500 years ago, and it's pretty similar. Can we think of anything? What do we have today that existed 1,500 years ago in the same format? Like, you can't say something like, I don't know, writing a letter versus email. Well, both of it's a type of written communication. Nothing like that. We're talking about something that has stayed pretty much in the same form. For example, here we have sculptures. Can you think of anything that we had 1,500 years ago that we have today that has pretty much remained unchanged? I'm trying to think of one. Can't even say religion, because religion has changed. Can't even say Catholicism, because Catholicism has changed. Islam has changed. Judaism has changed. What would it be? Can we think of anything? I can't think of anything. If you guys can think of anything, let me know. I mean, even clothing styles and fashion, that's changed. So it's interesting. Simple math? Okay. Yeah, I'll go with that. Simple math. Yeah. Even the more complex math has changed. So it's pretty interesting to just appreciate that level of consistency and security. Things between men and women, I disagree. Especially with like the advent of modern day feminism, allowing the Egyptians Egyptian women were rather free to just kind of do what they would like, for the most part. And there was, a good deal of equality, not just between men and women, but transgendered individuals, in, what's his name? Ashoka's, dynasty, or Ashoka's, rule in early India. But 1,500 years ago, the way that women are treated, like, if you kind of picked a place, whether we're talking about Korea, we're talking about Europe, we're talking about, certain areas there, women were like property. You know what I mean? They're not property now, so I would definitely disagree, yeah. Bricks are pretty consistent. Okay, maybe bricks. Yeah. I would say bricks and simple math. But, even how we use bricks is a little different, right? Maybe. Rich family, poor family. Yeah, maybe we still have rich and poor. Yeah, poor people still doing a lot of manual labor. Yeah, that's something I think would have stayed the same, unfortunately. In Egypt, there's not really a word for religion. That's because to Egyptians, it was just how life was. It's not like, oh yeah, there's, we have to go to, temple on Sunday. It was just, this is what you do. This is how life is. If I want my clothes to be clean, I wash them, and if I want the Nile to flood correctly, I go, honor one of the gods. That's just what you did. Okay. Things have changed between men and women since I was in high school. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. So just like the Mesopotamians, the Egyptians were polytheists, and we have our ibis-headed god here. Does anyone know any of these others? That's okay if you don't. I think a lot of them are pretty recognizable. And we talked about having a favorite god. Anybody have any favorite gods? So the pharaoh, though, was considered to be a form of one of the gods. He was the son of Ra, which can be written R-A or R-E, so that's why I included that spelling here. So he was basically like a human avatar of one of the gods. So what's going on in Egyptian society? Now, we have, I don't believe we've actually found any of these in archaeology. We've only seen these paintings or depictions of them. But as far as finding the crown, the physical crown, I don't think we found them just yet. So we ended up having this like separate Egypt. There were Upper Egyptians, there were Lower Egyptians, and eventually they were united under Pharaoh Menes. Okay, not mayonnaise, Menes, Menes. Sorry, do not speak Egyptian. The crown was combined, which I thought that's pretty cool. That's a cool concept, and they seem to work pretty well, right? It's like this one's open, this one's not. So they worked out pretty well, I think. So they, before that, were doing their own thing. And of course, much before that, people were living in this area before it became a civilization, before the creation of agriculture. So, remember that Egypt, as we know it, is its thing in history. It is not when people started living there. Okay, just to remember that. Osiris is the one I remember. Yeah, Osiris, and she had an interesting time. The one I like is Nut. Jip. That's okay. We'll just go with it. I just like how she's portrayed in a lot of these because she's the sky. So it's kind of cool. Just like how she's, I guess it's the dome, right? This is somebody's modern version of it, which I think looks really cool. So I just think it's interesting. Like, she's got this super long body in some of it. So it's just a interesting style choice. These are some of the artifacts that we found from prehistory. People that were living here, it was like small farming. It wasn't really a huge civilization. And that's why we talked about Mesopotamia first, because as far as we know, civilization really started there. Even though Egypt's really, really famous. Now, has anybody heard this ancient aliens thing? That instead of these like small farming communities, that instead ancient Egypt and all of the giant, megalithic construction, like the pyramids, the Sphinx and stuff. Have you guys heard that those were actually built like 36,000 years ago? Has anybody heard that? This is like the ancient aliens thing, or it's like an alternative archaeology. Has anyone heard that before? And one of the pieces of evidence they tried to submit is that, well, the Sphinx has a lot of rainwater erosion, like rain erosion on the Sphinx. Therefore, this could have only been built when the area got a lot more rain. Therefore, it was built at least 12,000 years ago, if not 36,000 years ago. Yeah, it's on the History Channel. I present this stuff to you guys and also to my other students because you should know that people are going to talk about it. The developed world, except for Japan, is now a woman's world because men stopped studying, playing games and soccer, and as a result got bad manual labor jobs. I think a lot of politicians would probably disagree with that, because there are still a lot of politicians, engineers, architects, doctors, research scientists, surgeons. A lot of them are still, a lot of those are still male-dominated fields. So the Sphinx situation, let's see. Yes, I replicated something. Hiram, I'm not sure what you're referring to there. So this, there is water erosion on it, but it's on the enclosure. Okay. It appears that, and this is not unusual or anything, but the Nile River has moved. So where we have the pyramids now, this used to be like where the Nile used to be. So the Nile now is not right next to the Sphinx. It used to be closer to the Sphinx. Over time, rivers, they meander, they move. So because of that, when the Nile River did its yearly flooding, that pours into the Sphinx enclosure. Now does that make sense? The reason that we can say that is because if it was due to rain, it would be found here and it would be found on the Sphinx itself. And yes, there's a lot of other types of erosion that has happened on the Sphinx, but we don't see any evidence of rain erosion on the Sphinx, but we do see water erosion on the enclosure. So we know that the Nile used to be closer, we know the Nile floods, and we see that it's on the enclosure. Again, if it was rain, it would be the enclosure and on the Sphinx, but it's not. Okay. Also, the Sphinx is more likely a dog than it is a cat, but that's another thing. There's some ideas that there might be additional Sphinx. We would have to find them. They might be buried. Remember, the Sphinx that we have was buried like up to here, so it's pretty interesting. Let's see. Most new doctors, lawyers, law professionals, and diplomats outside the 30% gender equality quota are women in Korea. Okay. I mean, I don't have any of the evidence on that. In terms of, like, I don't have anything to say, yes, I agree, or no, I disagree. But, you know, if that is the case, you know, I do know, of course, I'm not saying that women are doing a lot of manual labor jobs. But I don't know about diplomats outside the 30% gender equality quota, because the last I did check, the politicians that are female in Korea, it's either 9% or 11%. It's quite low compared to the rest of the world. Either way, it would still be different than 1,500 years ago. So I'm not sure what, if you're just adding an aside, AABB, I'm not sure how this was related to what we're talking about, but either way, yeah, it would still be the difference from 1,500 years ago for sure. I have a doctor's note, and it's for a stuffed pair of scrolls. Okay, again, Hiram, not sure what that has to do with that. Okay, Korea has a lot of architecture and civil engineers and CAD experts like yourself, both men and women. Cool. Again, I'm not sure like what you guys are trying to discuss. Are you trying to say that it's 50%, or is it what AABB was trying to seem to be implying, that it's more than 50% women and fewer, and that all men are now like doing these manual labor jobs or just living at home and playing games? I'm not exactly sure. I'm not sure what point you guys are trying to make. I'm really struggling to find out what point you guys are trying to make and how it's related to ancient Egypt. You guys are of course welcome to keep talking about it, but if we can try to maybe keep it a bit more on topic, that would be helpful, for sure. So Pharaoh Meni starts the Egypt's first dynasty, and we can see him here with the, I mean, this guy, it's over for this guy, isn't it? This guy's gonna get smashed. Now with this hair like holding position, it would almost look like he's gonna slash his throat, but he's holding what looks like a mace, and so I think he's just gonna bash this guy's face in. It's quite an interesting depiction overall. Let's see. The ancient scrolls were the old equivalents to modern cloud storage, and the columns of the old temples with scripture on them. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they would be exactly equivalent to modern cloud storage. I would say they might be more equivalent to like modern libraries, maybe. But I don't know about modern cloud storage because that sort of implies that you can access them from wherever. So that's why I think it's more of a physical library because you can access it when you go there. So I think that might be a better comparison. So for those of you that are not familiar with a dynasty is kings that come from the same family line. So it's a monarchy, but you're related. Okay, so monarchy is like a single governing situation, right? It's I am the king or I am the queen, and this is me doing this thing. A dynasty is that you are, it's like over time, monarchies over time, and the different monarchs are related to each other, genetically related. So the Egyptian kingdoms we can kind of split into 3 periods. It's the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and New Kingdom. And when I was on Paulogia's web or his show, I will call it a show, we did talk about one of the people on AIG had misunderstood Middle Kingdom as being a physical place. That there was the Upper Egypt, Middle Kingdom, and Lower Egypt, and that's not what it is. So it's these are time periods. The Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom are time periods. Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt are locations. Ancient and 18th Dynasty, Old and New Kingdom, Lord Charles Carnarvon and Howard Baker's tragic deaths may very well have simple medical explanations. I heard it was just malaria. Yeah, that's what I had heard. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Lord Carnarvon, this idea was that when they had unlocked the tombs of King Tut, there was an inscription about a curse that would befall anybody who disturbs the tomb, and then they had died of mysterious circumstances, but really it was just probably malaria. So each of these kingdoms, we define them as like long-term stability, no invasions, strong leaders. When we lose that stability, when we get invaded, when we're having weak leaders and it kind of falls into disarray and there's fighting, that's when the kingdom ends. Okay, so that kind of gives you this idea here. So the Old Kingdom starts with the unification, and we get, is this supposed to be, I'm trying to think of what this is over here, but we have the Sun Temple in Memphis. So we end up having this kingdom that lasts for about 500 years, okay? The Egyptians, the pharaohs are going to have 100% power, but they're going to have helpers, which makes sense, right? Is the pharaoh going to go house to house collecting taxes? No. Is the pharaoh going to go house to house to ensure people are doing all the things they're supposed to be doing and checking every single job site? No. So just because you have 100% power doesn't mean you want to be in charge of absolutely everything. So because of this need to keep control of many different people and the pharaoh not being able to physically do that, we create bureaucracy. Now I know bureaucracy has a lot of really negative terms today, and it's all of this idea like doing too much paperwork and so on and so forth. But really the bureaucracy that we're talking about is just administrative groups of people. They are nobles or otherwise higher up in society, and they are the ones that deal with rules. They make rules. They have special rules for themselves as well. So because the pharaohs are gods, we want them to keep doing work after death. Okay, so can you imagine you're the son of the sun god, right? Or you're the sun god's representation, like in physical embodiment on earth, and then you die. That night is going to be pretty tense. Because if they didn't manage to help you cross over the right way, you end up with the sun not rising the next day. So how scary would that be, you know? Let's see, in the comments section, Upper Egypt is south instead of north, but that's simply because of the flow of the Nile. Yes, Hiram, that's what we talked about. That's why I did Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt visually here. So we talked about that earlier in the PowerPoint. Actually, I thought you were here the whole time. All right. So we know, a lot of you know that the Egyptians had these ideas about life after death and this afterlife concept. The afterlife was really just continuation of life. That's all it was. It wasn't that you went to a heaven if you were a good person and went to a type of hell if you were a bad person. You either continued to live or you didn't. This is part of the Book of the Dead, which basically was a bunch of instructions for you to make sure you can go to the afterlife. What we have in this image here is our good friend Anubis weighing the heart against this feather. And so this feather represents like goodness, truth, and all of this stuff. And they weigh your heart physically. You know when you do something and you feel bad about it or guilty, you get like a heaviness in your chest? That feeling is what the Egyptians thought kind of like added a heaviness to your heart. So someone with a literally heavy heart would weigh more than the feather. If that happens, you go over to our good friend here. We have a, what do you guys see here in this like 3-part animal? I'm gonna let you guys answer that so I can enjoy my, it's supposed to be a peppermint mocha, but that cacao has been settling pretty hard. A bit bitter. It's okay. I mean, it's a pretty vicious animal, right? 3 vicious animals put together. I'm just not sure how well you guys can see it. If you're having issues seeing it, this is a crocodile head, an upper body of a leopard, and the lower body of a hippopotamus. Hippopotamus, they tend to kill people a lot. Even though they're vegetarians, they are very aggressive and surprisingly fast on land, so you best watch out. Yeah, people with cardiomegaly, right? Exactly. Amuts, exactly. Crocodile, leopard, and hippo. That's right. I just want to make sure you guys know it's a leopard and not a jaguar. Jaguars are in South America. And wearing Santa pants. Well, those Santa pants are the hippo pants. So I guess, yeah, it's a bowl, a butt full of jelly, I guess would be it there. If your heart was heavier than the feather, your good friend Anmut is going to eat you. End of story. You're done. That's it. Has anybody heard of indulgences in Catholicism? That's my question for you, but I'm also going to continue on while you guys answer that. Have you heard of indulgences in Catholicism? Another way that you could fail the afterlife test is if you take a misstep and fall into this chasm. And you're just gone. That's it. So it was either you managed to answer the questions correctly, do all the right things, take the correct paths in this like maze-like path to the afterlife, or you don't and you're dead forever. That's it. And actually that was the early, like the Jewish interpretation as well. You either continued to live or you just died. And early Christianity was the same way as well. You just died. That was it. Yeah, the crocodile water god. A little bit different. Yes, so the indulgences, Summer absolutely has heard of them. So the indulgences are pretty interesting. For those of you that haven't heard of them, basically, if I commit some kind of sin in Catholicism, I repent of my sin and I have to do a certain number of prayers and so forth to sort of not negate the sin, but to pay for the sin. An indulgence is something that I can purchase and somebody does that for me. So now instead of me atoning for my sin, a bunch of people are supposed to atone for it for me because I paid for this item. So let's say that I always have this right here. It's this this lip balm. If I bought this item, let's say this represents 100 Hail Mary prayers. So there would be maybe 10 people that would say 10 Hail Mary prayers on my behalf each, and then it's taken care of for me. That was this concept, which of course has nothing to do with anything biblical, and there's a lot of issues with that and a lot of criticism for that. This actually happened in ancient Egypt. So even with the Catholicism concept of an indulgence, it's not a new concept. There was this idea here to add weight to the feather side. So there were these items that you would buy, these idols, that would add weight to the feather side. So even if your heart was heavy, if you're adding weight to the side of the feather, then your heart would not weigh more than the feather's side. So you actually ended up with these indulgences things in ancient Egypt too. So it's pretty interesting. Protestantism started that people would literally buy forgiveness. Well, it wasn't just that. Protestantism started for several reasons. But yeah, they did protest, right? They weren't the only ones to protest, for sure. The idol issue had separated the Eastern Orthodox Church, for example. So this is one of the reasons that you ended up mummifying your leaders. And at first it was just the leaders, and then it was just kind of like anybody that could afford it. The mummification process is pretty interesting. We've basically figured it out, and that's cool. We haven't found like any recipes exactly written out, as far as I know, in terms of archaeology. We can basically understand how they did it. We found a lot of their tools for doing it as well, and yeah, it's just kind of like, you know, beef jerky on a different scale. There's also other ways that mummies can be made, intentionally or accidentally. You can accidentally make a dry mummy if you happen to die in a hot desert and are immediately buried. So let's say that there is a simum, a desert sandstorm, covers you up. You are cooked and burnt, and you're cooked and suffocated to death, kind of at the same time. And then you're covered by this sand. This is going to take the moisture out of your body, and eventually if someone finds you later, you're going to be this dried corpse, you know, this mummy. So that's a way that we can have a dry mummy accidentally made. Has anyone heard of different ways that other mummies are made? Remember, the goal mummification is to make a mummy, and a mummy is a body that doesn't decay. So what are some ways we can prevent decay? We think of this, you know, classic Egyptian deliberate mummy. There's actually a lot of different ways to make mummies. The mummies in Peru, yes. So those mummies are frozen mummies, not ice mummies. They're frozen mummies. These are mummies that are in an area that is very, 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 very cold. So they are high altitude. There's not a lot of precipitation that can become ice to damage the skin. And there's not a lot of animals or bugs or anything that really live up there. There's also low oxygen. So any of those bacteria that eat your body after you die, those tend to not be able to get enough oxygen to support that, you know, living and consumption of your body. So we end up with these frozen mummies that are really gorgeous. We can look at these, let's see, Peruvian mummy. So they look really gorgeous. Some of them are dried out. Some of them have a different level of preservation. Don't look at this alien mummies thing, please. This is really one of the classic ones. This is from the Incan time period, so it's not as old as maybe some of these other mummies might be. And of course, she's covered in a lot of clothing, so that's also going to help preserve her skin. But just a really, really gorgeous, gorgeous mummy, isn't it? Just, you can even see her hair and everything. Just really gorgeous. The ice mummies are going to look like meat that got left in your freezer too long. What's his name? Ötzi. Well, I guess you can just write Ötzi, right? Ötzi is going to be our classic ice mummy. He's got all of his organs and everything in there. They're just really, 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 really dehydrated. And in the same way, excuse me, in the same way that you would have those pieces of meat like flaking off if you've left meat in the freezer too long, we actually have some of that happening here. So it's kind of interesting to see him. So he's going to look really, really, really dry. But he has to stay cold. And that's the same with the frozen mummies that we saw before, those high altitude frozen mummies. They have to be cold Otherwise, they're going to start to defrost and then decompose. So that coldness is also preserving them. Ötzi, the way that he was preserved was that he was covered by snow and ice. If he would have just died in the snow and ice where he was, he probably would have been consumed by an animal. So he was covered by snow and ice. It appears that he was killed, that somebody had murdered him. So he was not only not by himself, but he was in an area that perhaps had more traffic. So that would really lend itself to having more animals as traffic as well, and leaving him pretty, free easy pickings for dinner. So he was covered up by ice and snow afterwards. So those are 3 different types of mummies we talked about. There's actually 2 more, the bog mummy and the wet mummy. Both of them tend to be quite wet. I remember a female mummy with a tattoo. There's a lot of them, actually, a lot of them. Yes, the bog mummy, the atheist. So the bog mummies, a lot of them are found in the UK. These we can see quite obviously because of their color, okay? Regardless of what their hair color may have been, regardless of what their skin color may have been, we end up with this color change. The skin color turns basically pitch black, and the hair color, which you can see here, it's sort of a reddish brown color, okay? So why does this happen? So a bog is a peat bog that these are found in. This is a wetland or swamp, however you want to call it, but it has peats. What is peats? Excuse me. It's this stuff here, okay? Having a peat bog, that's pretty difficult for any kind of thing that needs oxygen to live in. Additionally, you can see here that this guy is scooping this out. He's doing it because you can burn peat. It's really, really good for burning. It's like, you can kind of think about it as pre-coal. Coal, of course, is compressed. This is compressed carbon as well, but not as compressed as coal would be. But it is used for burning stuff. But you can see it is compressed. And this is why we end up with this flattened kind of look. So not only is it difficult for anything to break it down because of the lack of oxygen, so there's no fish or anything really living in these peat bogs, but then over time you end up being crushed by this peat. So it's pretty interesting. Human hibernation would be great. I would like to live 1,000 years. Yeah, I think it would be awesome too. Cranberries are more disgusting. Mummification of John Paul Jones. I'm not sure who John Paul Jones is. Mummification? I'm not sure what you mean. Is it this guy that you're talking about? Like Captain Jones? Is that the person that you're talking about? If you want to share what you know about this mummification, feel free. Just want to touch on the wet mummy before we go and continue on. So the wet mummies, most of them we found are in China, almost exclusively. We found, as far as I know, 2, but I don't want to say 100%. We might find them later. There may be some that I'm not aware of. The most famous is this mummy here, Lady Di. Pretty weird looking kind of thing we got going on. This is her tongue here. This is like her eye, and then this other part around here is like the sclera, the white part of her eye. So her eyes have actually come out. Her preservation is amazing. The people, like, if you want to watch Lady Di, I'll put maybe a link to it in the comments or the details section, or both. They performed an autopsy on her. That's how well preserved she is. There were a lot of attempts on preserving bodies in the ancient world, and one option was this. We're not really sure if the wet mummy was deliberate or accidental or both, but we don't know what the liquid is entirely made out of. Now some people might have a question about that, like, can't we just test it? We can just test the liquid that they're found in, and we can, but that doesn't mean we understand all the compounds. We're still finding new compounds, even today, for, even things that people have used for traditional medicine for a really long time, we're now isolating these compounds, understanding how they work. So just because we can test the liquid does not mean that we understand what is in there. But these wet mummies, again, very well preserved. It has to be something to do with keeping oxygen out and also preserving the skin. But the brain is preserved, the hair is preserved, the organs are preserved. We know the last thing she ate, for example. They're very well preserved mummies. Please do not confuse this with a water mummy. There's not really a water mummy. These are wet mummies, but the liquid is not water. So just so we know. So we have a dry mummy, frozen mummy, ice mummy, bog mummy, and wet mummies, but not water mummies. Okay. In Andong, they found a mummy with a love letter. Yeah, my students had mentioned that to me when we talked about wet mummies this year. Was it a wet mummy, though? Because they were not sure about that. Let's see. There was a bad railroad in Andong, which had been closed and was dismantled to make things right. To make things right with what? In what way? To make things right with what? Was it going over the mummy or something like that? So we talked about the different kinds of mummies. Cool. Great. So these mummies, of course, they're dry mummies with hot air, salt, and removing the internal organs. I will put a link to that. As we talked about before, I can't put a video in here because then it flags that the video is, I don't know, against the rules or something. So the Old Kingdom ends with war, and 150 years after this war starts, we get the Middle Kingdom. And there's some differences happening. First of all, this is a fun picture, I think. I can make it a little bigger for you. I do think it's kind of a fun picture, because this guy is just... What are they depicting in this image? Can you guys see it? Based on parasites found in the mummies, they figure out the diet. Yeah, I think it's super, super amazing. The railroad was made by the Japanese. Well, they are changing a lot of stuff in terms of the Japanese these days. They had, not recently, but within the time that I've been here, they changed the address system because it was based on the Japanese method. Does anybody see what's going on in this image here in terms of what's happening? I'm not expecting you to read the hieroglyphs, of course, but what is going on? Anybody know? I'm not sure what you're meaning there, Hiram. I know Hiram's message didn't post because there was like a profanity reference. I don't know if we'll put that in there, but yeah. So this is not cuneiform. These are hieroglyphics. So they're different in that they are pictures. Cuneiform had some early kind of quasi picture stuff, and depending on how you read it, some of it is like logograms, which would be like it's like a thing that represents a concept, or they are read as syllables. So that's another way to read them. Cuneiform has been used for a long time. So what we have here, if you guys are not able to see it, or if you can see it and you just can't type, it's a banquet. So it's pretty interesting. So the guy looks like he might be singing into an ice cream cone, but that's most likely like a leg joint. So that top part, maybe there's bones or something sticking out of it, and this guy is just ready to go to town. We've got, it looks like the leg of maybe a gazelle, a goat head, some kind of bone with meat around it. I mean, this is something you would see in like a Nintendo, what's that game? It was like an arcade game, and then it got moved to different Nintendo systems, and then I think it was on PS1. No, it starts with a G. Gauntlet Legends. So this looks like some kind of meat you would find there. We've got a goose, a fish, some kind of antelope, big old sausage looking thing. These spikes, I'm not sure what the spikes are supposed to be representing. The circles may represent bread. So this guy's hanging out to eat. Okay, he's just having a good time. So some of the differences in the Middle Kingdom is, number one, the pharaoh cared more about the people instead of being this like far away, removed god concept. And they started trading with a lot of outside regions like Syria, Kush, Crete, and Mesopotamia. If you guys are going to be talking about Kush and any kind of references to any greenery, yes, that is partially where some of the of that herb comes from, is the mountains in that region. We'll talk about that in a later thing. Egypt also expanded by taking over Nubia. Nubia is a kingdom to the south of Egypt. So as we talked about, we have this government structure here. Farmers, slaves, those are going to be the majority of people. Okay. The pharaohs own the land, they give it to nobles, and the nobles paid farmers to work the land. Okay, so this is a system that we end up using for so many years. Farmers and slaves are forced to do stuff like serve in the military, but also build things. Not pyramids. The pyramids were constructed. A lot of these, I'm not saying that the pyramid construction people could not be chosen from among slaves, but these were people that had like good medical care. They were taken care of very well. They had their own place that they lived. Some of them were literate. They were able to write notes and stuff to each other. And we know that because we found the construction workers' villages. And we found these big pieces of pottery that were basically used like text messages. You can kind of scrawl something on the back of this pottery and pass your note to somebody. And so we were very excited when we found this, and it was just like, oh wow, what esoteric discussions were they having? And it was just stuff like, hey, do you want to get drunk after work? It was just that kind of thing. They were sexting each other. This was just very everyday people doing everyday things. So this wasn't like discussions on the gods and was the pharaoh that, no, it was just, hey, you want to get drunk after work? It was just that kind of stuff. Yes, Gauntlet was very fun. Today, that's where some of the worst anti-black racism really happens. That imaginary line that separates South Sudan from Ethiopia. Yep, and I would also imagine there would be some. South Sudan is Muslim as far as not just in majority, but I believe that's also part of the government. And Ethiopia is not, so there might be some of that as well. Arranged marriages are going to be pretty common just for everybody. Usually around the time the girl is 12 and the boy is 14. Husbands are the leaders of the house and stuff, but women could be pretty much able to do most of the stuff they're able to do today. Getting a job, owning property, receiving inheritance, divorce, that sort of thing. And unlike in other cultures, they could make their own money, operate businesses, and of course some of them even became pharaohs. Pharaoh Nefertiti, as we talked about, especially under the name Smenkhare. Pharaoh Hatshepsut, which we had talked about earlier in this, how she had been depicted in a very masculine way, and here she is with that false beard. And also Pharaoh Cleopatra. Cleopatra was Macedonian, but of course still a pharaoh in Egypt. I wonder if Bir Tawal was ever inhabited. Not off the top of my head. I don't have any answer for you there. So the inventions, of course, we have the hieroglyphics. And these, again, are logograms. They're going to be to represent a concept more than a sound. Of course, there's a sound to pronounce them, but it's more of a concept rather than like a phonetic kind of thing. If you care about the Book of the Dead, this is one of the plates that has been translated into English, so you can check that out later if you would like. So for fun, there are people that use some of these types of sounds to write their name. If you want to do that, it's a good time. Using their understanding of astronomy, especially Sirius, the star Sirius, not super serious especially. They end up making this calendar with 365 days, and Sirius was one of their major points in the sky. So it wasn't just the sun and the moon, but it was also tracking Sirius. Has anybody heard the name or the phrase, the dog days of summer? Has anybody heard of that? The dog days of summer. I'm going to let you guys answer that, but I am going to go on as we're thinking about that. Of course, one of the more popular contributions to history, and I guess cultural history, would be these really famous buildings, which are the pyramids. Here's one of the early pyramids, which was a step pyramid because it looks like steps. So the step pyramid of Djoser is going to be one of them. Opal Pal says yes, that they've heard of the dog days of summer. The dog days of summer has a reference to Sirius. So in the longest part of summer, the hottest time of summer, that's when Sirius was most visible. Sirius, the nickname of Sirius is the dog star, and so when they were talking about like the longest days of summer, they're talking about the Sirius days of summer. So we know this is the longest point, and then after that, I would say if we were to use a similar concept, we would talk about summer solstice, which of course is based on the sun and not the star. Because of precession and the time that has passed, Sirius does not show up in the same way on the same days, but that's what it meant, the dog days of summer. It was the days that Sirius was in the sky. So it doesn't have to do with like eating dogs or sweating and panting like a dog. I mean, dogs don't sweat, but you know, like the kind of panting like a dog because it's so hot. It doesn't have to do with that. It has to do with the Sirius the dog star. Yes, that's what Hiram said as well, Sirius the dog star. Yes, Cleopatra was during the Ptolemy dynasty, and she was Macedonian. She was also the seventh one. The one that we know is Cleopatra the seventh. So that is also fun to know. These are some of the really gorgeous statues, and every time I see this image, I'm just staggered by how big these statues are. I mean, these are gigantic. This is the Valley of the Kings. So I know some of you may have heard something about, oh, well, the pyramids were never used for the kings. There's no sarcophagus, and there's all blah, blah, blah. They were. We have writing from them at this time period. They were used as burial sites for the kings. The problem is that they became very easy to loot. You could also scratch off anything, or just touching the walls, especially as you're trying to navigate in the dark. You're removing paint as you're doing that. Not a great time. The Valley of the Kings, you guys probably know from King Tut. But there's also been a lot of other findings in this region. But this is where you buried the pharaohs instead. There's some accounts that after the construction finished, the priests would kill the workers. Not 100% sure on that, but it does kind of show just how secretive this region was. And that is what I have for you. We are stopping here. If you guys have any last minute questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to take a break and probably record the short version of this and all of that good stuff. I hope you've enjoyed this. We've had some pretty interesting conversation, kind of went off, but that's okay. But overall, we actually ended right on time, as opposed to 2 hours, 2.5 hours in. So that's been good. My back's not killing me entirely. My migraine's not destroying me. So, yay! All right. Thank you guys for joining me. Please let me know either in the comments section or in the comments section, I guess it would be, or on the Discord chat, if you would be too confused or distracted, or I don't know how to phrase it necessarily, if I also was running a geography class concurrently, or if I should just finish. Do you think it would just make more sense to finish the entire textbook of the history class and then start the geography class? Just get curious on your idea. Let me know, and I will see you guys later. Alrighty, adios, have fun, 再见, all of that good stuff. Bye bye.